Joe Birch, thank you for coming on the show, my friend. How's it going?
Hey Matt, it's great to be here. You and I have had so many phone conversations. Nice to see you in person and be able to join you today.
Exactly, man. Well, dude, I'm glad that we get to have you on because it's a bit of a different episode than we've, normally been doing with other people in regards to the high performance side. But where Joe's really interesting, like I've explained a little bit in the intro, is that Joe's a guy who I've known you now, obviously, through our dear friend Brandon Arado, right, who got us introduced. And whenever we're talking to Nar or talking to you, it's like there's always a connection of people that have high networks and highly impactful people. So having Joe on, where I like this is he's gonna really dive into the business side of sports today, which I'm super fascinated about because you know what? We've talked about it all the time with like different kinds of titles and CEOs and COOs and so on of clubs and whatnot, but I want to really go deep on what that means and kind of what that entails because you've done a fantastic job at helping build and grow this organization that you're at, which we'll dive into. But more importantly, Joe, you're at the front of a lot of innovation, right? So I want to start by you telling us a little bit about what you do at Kitchener, what you guys have been up to. Joe's with, like we mentioned before, the Kitchener Rangers in the OHL. So I'm going to let you take it away, Joe, and kind of catch us up with everything.
Wow, yeah, thanks, Matt. I mean, it's really interesting in the way that we view day to day now that we have hockey games and that we have
Yeah.
fans. I mean, now it's about trying to get back to normal for our fan experience and trying to operate on a normal level. And so that's only been for a short period of time. So
Right.
for the past 15 months or even since September, it's been how can we operate smartly and ensuring that we can give as close to a normal OHL experience for one, our players, which is always
Mm-hmm.
our priority here, two, our fans, and three, our staff. And my day to day is trying to keep us moving forward through new ways of thinking, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Try to keep us moving forward under working with, unfortunately, less staff, which also means more workload for people. So trying to create an environment that is super healthy,
Yeah.
engaging, and fun. Trying to find ways to move us forward under working under different operating circumstances, and that
Yeah.
is directly related to fans in the stands and not having the normal operating budgets that we have had in the past. So it's been really a unique year in overcoming new challenges that one this organization has never been faced with.
Yeah.
And but it's been exciting because as we get through all of this and we start to work, and I know we'll talk a little bit. The
Mm-hmm.
future is incredibly bright here for us as the Rangers, both on and off the ice, and I'm just get to be the fortunate one who kind of gets to captain everything in many ways, as I have a fantastic team of both hockey operations and business operations staff. So
I love that.
there's a lot there in many ways, I guess, if
So,
that helps us.
yeah, because I want to unpack this a little bit. Like I wrote down a word financial resilience. So this is something that we have to look at a lot. It's funny, with like youth athletes coming through it and who are trying to get to the next level or collegiate athletes. And we're talking about financial resilience and having that ability essentially to, work with the coaches they need to on a financial scale. So that's just for one athlete, right? Like let's branch this out to an organization for a second and really talk about this because I feel like in the media we hear a lot about, what budget cuts have done and so on in regards to like the surface level. But let's go a little bit deeper on that, Joe, because you're somebody that I know even from speaking before when we've had our conversations back and forth. It's like, we've got to find a way now to adapt to this and adapt to that. And it's like, you said something that really sparked me. The players come first. So in a time where we
Yeah.
know evidently we're going to have to make some kinds of budget cuts just because that's what's going on. Some of that's going to obviously impact, the people you can bring in for development and so on as well. It's going to impact the people around the rink. How do you keep it a players first approach like you have, really making sure
Yeah.
that, you have to kind of cut some of the fat when you're in a situation like this, but you're also making sure that you're keeping the development standards high?
Yeah, that's what, Matt, particularly with us being a community-owned organization.
Mm-hmm.
So our brand is as strong as anything, certainly in the OHL, but definitely in the Waterloo region and in the city of Kitchener. We are everything.
Yep.
So it's been a real balancing act because our fans and our season ticket members are saying, "Hey Joe, what happened to FanFest? What
Yeah.
happened to the Christmas party? What happened? Why aren't our players out in the community more often? What about at the start of games? You guys used to do fire and smoke and
Mm-hmm.
laser shows. Where are all these things? And that's been really hard because, as I said, fan experience is critical for us for them wanting to return. But
Yep.
all of a sudden, when I start to look at a budget and how to operate as an organization, FanFest, a direct expense, a significant one to us,
Yeah.
right? When you put on
Sure.
hosting 3,000 fans here with air balloons and parades and barbecues, smoke and lights and other things add up when you do that in front of every home game. And now what we did is we said, okay, instead of spending maybe in some of those external fan facing experiences that people were so customary and used to, we said,
Mm-hmm.
no, let's not do that because we may need this season those extra dollars so that our player experience, which might be going into Windsor a night
Yeah.
before a league game so that they can have proper rest and sleep and get into the hotel. It might be doing things to ensure that their Christmas gifting, these sound like
Mm-hmm.
little things, but people, when you do
I love
Christmas
that.
gifting for 23 hockey players and 6 or
Yeah.
8 hockey staff, those sorts of things add up. And they're little pieces that I really felt being a former player and understanding what those kids go through, but also what they've been through in the last 15 months, they probably place some value on.
Yeah.
And so those are very real examples, Matt, that we said we can't spend here, and we're going to move the dollars over to here that are directly for our players to ensure that they're still getting the very best junior experience from our program, so that when they leave here, they say, man, even through the pandemic, the Kitchen Rangers treated me incredibly. I love them. I'm a Ranger. And it was hard to do because I love our fans, but we had to make some sacrifices.
Well, this is what I kind of wanted to highlight out, and I think this is why, Joe, you and I hit it off a lot. It's like there's one thing that stands out to me about that all, and it's culture, right? Like
Yes.
there's evidently a vision that you guys and a culture that you guys are preserving even through a tough time. And we know, from some of these amazing books that you read on these organizations or companies that make it through hundreds of years built to last, right? They talk about preserving a culture and maintaining the culture and so on. So I want you to dive into a little bit about that because I feel like
Sure.
that's a really big one that I feel like a lot of people think they have a culture and they talk about it and it's a bit of a buzzword and it's a throw around, but it's like you guys just lived through that for what, 2 years now, right?
Yep.
Where we had the fortunate ability to be working with the Chicago Steel, right, in the USHL, which is it's a different program on its own, but the funding and so on, but it's and they have a great culture and we've seen it, but in the OHL specifically, I've seen you guys band together like this. And it's like, what have you guys put in place to really bring this culture forward? And how did you guys establish it? Like, it's something that it oozes out of you, Joe, whenever I talk to you, and it's a great thing. And I want to know how you guys got there.
Well, hey, and I appreciate that because it is something that I know I personally believe, along with Coach Mike McKenzie, is that it's a competitive advantage.
Mm-hmm.
If you do know how to create it and harness it and grow it, we can all hire. I could go and hire the best skills coach tomorrow, the very
Yep.
best strength coach, the very best mental performance coach. And I know you and I have chatted about this, but I can't hire the best cultural, organizational person. You have to
Mm-hmm.
cultivate it. You have to grow it. You have to tweak it. You have to constantly work on it. So it's a daily thing, and that's even within our the way that we speak to each other
Yes.
and how I work with all of my staff and helping them to grow and how it's important for them to be working in an environment that is safe and healthy and that they enjoy because then they will perform at a high level. There's no
Yep.
yelling, there's no screaming. It's archaic. It's something that we really place a high value on in having people who want to grow and want to excel. But it's a daily thing. Daily, how can we get better through this pandemic? We as an organization really tried to grow through BIPOC and diversity and inclusion. How could I educate myself so
Yeah.
that we can work within our staff and help that be a daily basis. So you can't take a day off on it.
Yeah.
It some people may find it exhausting. I love working with people. I'm passionate about it. I may not know everything about selling a ticket or
Mm-hmm.
securing a sponsorship, but boy, do I love helping my director of ticketing make a sale, or my director of
Yeah.
sponsorship securing a partner, because then they're growing and they're achieving their success. And it's just a really healthy environment that we try to create by the way that we treat people and how we operate here.
And this is a perfect segue into my next question because this is what separates good COOs from great COOs, right? Essentially, in a sense where it's like not just carrying out a daily task, right? It's deeper than that.
Yeah.
It's instilling the culture and the vision that the organization has, right? And being able to do that through actions and so on. So, Joe, you're kind of like, a whisperer in this sense of being able to take those visions and bring them to life. And I want you to give our viewers a bit of an idea of how you have to really go through that because you know what? It's not an easy job, like you said. There are no days off. And more importantly, you're responsible for such a wide range, especially knowing the way that the Rangers are ran, right? Like it's not just your typical private owned organization where you look at one
No.
thing and so on. You guys have to consider everything in the community, right? So like teach us a bit about that because that in itself is something it's a gem if you can really tap into those skills, you know?
Yeah, and and that's a really great point about our organization, the uniqueness of it, and I will. So when I was hired, one of the things that I really understood and that continues highlighted to me is my understanding of hockey operations, business operations, but then also community and the way that
Yes.
we give back. And quite honestly, Matt, I don't think I'm a real complicated guy. So when I work with people and my staff, I really try to simplify it. And I say to my staff, how can I help you? It's
Yeah.
not Joe's idea. It's
Yeah.
not. It's a collaborative idea. And hey, director of ticketing or director of graphics, how can I help you with what you're doing today?
Hmm.
Because I want to see us achieve the goals and the objectives of the organization. Or hey, Mike McKenzie, how can I help you in
Yeah.
preparation for the draft? I could sit
Yes.
back and say, Mac, you got to do this or you need to do that. But you know what? That ultimately doesn't help him.
Hmm.
And I really believe that the servant leadership type style is best suited for collaborative, high functioning teams. And that's
Yeah.
what we are. And
I
that's
love it.
where I want us to be. And within this organization, because we are community owned, we have a responsibility to show that type of um, actions, for lack of
Hmm.
better words, that type of actions in every single thing we do as a ranger. And that can be a lot to ask of people, and that
Hmm.
can be a lot to ask of our players. But maybe those people aren't the right fits for our organization, so we find people that fit those sort of standards. And for me, it's just a daily. How can I help? What can we do to help you get better? And let's have some fun doing it.
I love that. So it's really, you guys almost have broken it down into a science then of finding the right people, making
Yeah,
sure the right people fill the seats. But like, even, see, this is where it's like, it goes beyond just player selection or coach selection, right? Like, we're talking like the people that actually buy into this vision. I know from running our company at Molliteum, and it's like, I'll never forget when my brother and I started really hiring, and we're like, oh my God, okay, hold on. So you mean to tell me we got to find people that breathe, dominate, serve, impact, passion, resolve, and believe in what we're doing? All right, let's do it. And it's like at the start, it's a daunting process, right? And it's like,
yeah,
okay, I've got to look for these people and how do I find them and is it the right fit? And it's funny that you say the service part because I do believe in service leadership as well, right? Where it's, hey man, if you're doing what's in the best interest of somebody that's standing in front of you, you're never going to have a wrong result because if it doesn't work, you just flip the way you're doing it and you're going to find a way, right? And it's adaptability. So having that approach and just being able to carry that out. And I love what you said too, how it's not just my vision, right? It's like, so I've got this vision and I've got to get the people on board to complete that vision. You can't just give it away to somebody and say, "Hey, go do your piece." And I know that's why we hire talented people, right? But it's like
right.
talented people still need a leader, right? And
Yeah,
talented people still need a direction and a pat on the back sometimes and so on because it's the alpha sense of people that come through organizations. I think we tend to forget that those alphas before at one point, we're learning the process of becoming one. And when you put them in a different environment, it's always tough to kind of readjust. So I love that you have that style, which kind of leads me into the next part. Like, Joe, you're, as a person and as an organization, you're a very innovative guy, right? Like, whenever we speak, whenever we have a conversation, I was saying this to my brother before we started. I was like, "Hey, Joe's calling. Give me half an hour." And it's like, it's not a quick 5 minute like call. It's
No,
not
I'm
like
sorry.
and it's no, but it's not even a bad one. Like, you know, when some people call and they just beat around the bush, with Joe, it's like right
Yeah,
down to
man.
business. So, I
Yeah.
mean, you're innovative. You've always got something new coming up. Like, how do you stay cutting edge? Like, it has to be more than just reading the magazines or whatever. Like, you must have a system that you've put in place for yourself to stay ahead of things. And I want to know about it.
Yeah, that's I appreciate that's very complimentary because again, it's back to being leaders and
Hmm.
showing leadership, and I've always felt in whatever role that I've worked in, I've had to have that responsibility. I think it's important, but Matt, I do a lot of R&D, research and duplicate.
I
Again,
love that.
I'm a simple person, so if there's something that's working in soccer, MLS, or if there's something that's working in the NBA, or if there's something that's working in, minor league baseball. Part of also being a good leader in many ways is to be able to communicate the
Hmm.
idea and then use your staff to make it fit to your organization. And then being the person up front, in my view, to step forward to have the courage to try it.
Hmm.
And so I may see an idea, um, bring it to my staff and say, hey, what do you guys think of this? I saw this from wherever. I read it in a book or I saw somewhere. You know what, Joe? It may not work this way, but if we do this, it'll fit in Ranger Nation. Okay, are we going to upset the
Love it.
apple cart? Maybe, but that's fine. As an example,
Sure.
it could be anything, right? But
Hmm.
I'll be the one at the front who will be able to have the courage to step out in front and say, we're going to try something because we believe these are the benefits of it, whether it's
Hmm.
towards community, whether it's towards hockey operations, whether it's towards business operations. And I'm also not afraid to say, if something doesn't work, it doesn't work. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean we give up on it, but we may tweak it. And where I say that, and I say that, and I'm sort of stumbling over it, but because we are community owned,
Hmm.
anything the Rangers announce will grab attention within our
Of
local
course.
community, but also OHL across the board. And so I have to be prepared to say why it worked, why it didn't work, and why we're doing it, so that it adds value to the organization and we move ahead with it. So again,
Yeah.
I think I'm answering it. I hope I am answering it, Matt.
Yeah,
Is
for
that
sure.
I take the info, I observe a lot, I watch a lot, I read a lot. I listen to people a lot, to be quite
Hmm.
honest. Great people like yourselves or Brandon, or I coach minor hockey. I hear what
Yes.
kids and parents want. Well, how do I translate those things
Yes.
into things that can add real great value to our organization here? And we're not afraid to try.
There's okay, so there's two things I'm going to go in on that I was taking notes on, and we're going to unpack one in a second. But let's talk about the courage part for a sec, because I think this is applicable obviously to sports organizations, but it's applicable to entrepreneurs as well, right? Where it's like,
Yeah.
listen, I was reading the other day a great book, that Atomic Habits book. Like, I like to read through it a
Mm.
couple times and just go back to it, right? And he was talking about motion versus actually, moving forwards. And he's like, you can have motion, which is like doing all this research and so on, which is part of the process. But a lot of people get stuck in the motion part of the process, right? And it's
Yeah.
like, you never take action on it. And you have to have the courage to do that, because this is what people don't get about innovation. It's like 90% risk, right? And
Yes.
this, and it's, and I'm not trying to over exaggerate that, but even with us, like when we started branching out, I'll never forget in 2017, I think, and we started doing consulting as well as just one-on-one coaching. I remember looking at my brother and being like, my gosh, man, like, can we do this? And it's like, listen, if we don't try, we're never going to know. And it was
Yeah.
rough a little bit at the start. Like, I'll be honest, we had to figure out our cues and so on, but the risk was all there. And it's like, listen, we're kind of flipping the business model where every 3 years, essentially, we've been kind of pivoting in a good direction. And it's like, you've got to do that. So
Yeah.
for you being a community owned team, it's kind of like, what's interesting about this, Joe, is that you guys basically have a board of directors and it's your community, right? And it's
Yeah.
it's it's still people you need to report to above you. And what people don't get when there is a board, because we worked with tons of these CEOs before, there's like this middle pressure effect. So there's a CEO sitting in the middle, or, you know, a company in the middle, and you've got pressure from your employees, you got pressure from the board, and it's a squeezing effect. How do you deal with that? How do you, because
Yeah.
that's a lot to take on. Like I've been there before. So teach us about that.
Yeah, you know what? That's a great comment, and for me, the best way that I've found to handle it is I really believe strong leaders communicate well, and communicating is not just oral; it's not always
Yep.
written; it's also listening.
Yes.
And I think that's been critical. I also believe that's something that I've learned along the way here as I've grown is controlling emotions
Mm-hmm.
and your emotional intelligence, right? So you get the outside, and the board of governors, or excuse me, the board of directors that I
Mm-hmm.
work with, or my staff, are critical to me even having a job. So
Yes.
they're equally important to me in listening and understanding where they're coming from. And if people are
Mm-hmm.
have criticisms or ideas that may or may be able to be put into action, I have to give them their opportunity to speak and to share what they're passionate about. So
Yes.
can't just be me. They may have complaints, so I have to put emotions in check and have hard
Mm-hmm.
discussions. But I think that those two key pieces, understanding your emotions and having good emotional
I love that.
intelligence, along with being a strong communicator, are
Mm-hmm.
what are best to navigate, groups of people where we all can be self-centered at times. People have their own agendas at times, and
Yes.
and sometimes you just listen and
Yep.
you figure out ways to do it. I say to myself all the time, never a bad idea. And I know people talk
Yeah.
about that all the time, and I say I mean that. I said it
Yes.
doesn't. I'll encourage my director of ticketing as an example to give an idea on communications, and people are like, well, what do they know? Well, they may know something that could be
Yes.
helpful to us, right? And it doesn't always mean. And why I say in my view, there's never a bad idea, because we may say no today, but we
Mm-hmm.
may only be saying no today on an idea because of
Yes.
finances, timing in a season, people to execute it and fulfill it, somebody to quarterback it and lead it. But let's park that.
Mm-hmm.
I have a working document that I use internally here with my staff that's just future initiatives and ideas. And it's an Excel doc
Yes.
that we all work on. We throw things in, we put a potential start date, who might be the quarterback on it, and then if we see it through,
I love
and we revisit it quite often and say, hey, you know what? This idea on a playoff ticket concept, I really like that.
it.
Let's
Yeah.
Now's the time to do that.
I
And
love that.
anyways, it's about, again, it's back to not overcomplicating it. Great
I
communication
love that.
skills, understanding your emotions, keeping emotions in check, and having that great emotional intelligence. And I think that becomes really important, because then it helps you to manage and work with your team on a real successful basis more often than not.
I love it. Have you guys ever heard of Monday.com?
No, no. Who are they?
You, dude, you got to check that out. Man, so we use,
Okay.
and this isn't like, we're not sponsored or anything by this. Like Monday.com is, it's honestly, man, it's a project management tool. It's, brother,
Okay.
I'm telling you, Joe, it is fantastic. Like we use it at Molliteum for everything internal. And if you can picture
Okay.
it, it's like, it's the coolest Excel-like doc, but it's dashboards for every part of your company.
Cool.
So we got like a marketing and ops of this, coaching that. I'm telling you, man, like it for me personally, it changed my complete organization because I'm a journal guy. So I'll
Yeah.
write it down and then it gets folded and put away. But Mondays, like you can see what everybody's doing. It's really cool, man. Like you got to check it out. I
Amazing.
love it.
Yeah.
And
I'll
it's
look at
again,
that.
it's not a plug. But the
Yeah.
other side of it, I was going to say, what I wanted to revisit quick, because we share the same philosophy here at Molliteum, and I love this because we've grown as a company in a great way where we're working with some of the top professional athletes in the world, some of the top Fortune 500 companies in the world, organizations in the world. But we have what we call the Molliteum Futurum, which is literally the kids and the youth side of what we do, from high performance students to athletes and so on. We believe in understanding what's always coming through the pipeline because that actually helps us communicate with the top of the pipeline, which are the
Yeah.
top individuals. I
You
want
got
you to
it.
teach us a bit about that because you are a coach, like you said, at the youth level as well.
Yeah.
You're very in tune with your people, and like you said, you're a communicator. What do you feel, Joe, is maybe something right now at the youth level you would like to see a little bit more of? And what is
Yeah.
something that we'll ask and say, have you taken from the youth level maybe and even applied it here in Kitchener?
Oh, boy, it's every day I learn something new. With my oldest boy is 10 years old, my youngest boy is 8 years old, and every time I'm at a hockey rink with either of them, I seem to learn something.
Yes.
And but particularly the one thing that I've learned and I have observed and seen is that they're way more advanced. At least the 10-year-old group is way more advanced and knowledgeable on things that are major societal issues. And
Wow.
I find that we don't do a strong enough job in youth sports to help to educate when we have the opportunity. So here's an example when the stuff, unfortunate circumstances that related around Kyle Beach were
Mm-hmm.
announced with the Chicago Blackhawks. Many of my players had heard about it. We
Yep.
heard about this Blackhawks thing. So I spoke to them about it, and I
Good.
worked with a communication strategist to figure out what were appropriate or inappropriate words to use to 10-year-olds to talk to them about the importance and the ability to talk to adults if you're in a situation not unlike what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And where, I did that on my own, and this
That's
isn't about
fantastic.
Joe, but
Yep.
what it is to me though is it shows a bit of a miss sometimes that occurs within our systems, is that that's a very serious issue and a very
Yep.
important issue. But I think sometimes as the broader youth sports, and it doesn't matter, my guys play lacrosse,
Mm-hmm.
soccer, they've played baseball, so it's not just a hockey thing. We think they're too young, and they're
Yes.
too young to learn about things that can help them to grow as people, that can help us within society. And to tie the two together, as 10-year-olds, I brought in somebody to talk to them about mental health. Last year in the middle of the pandemic, I think we chatted about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I brought in somebody, Rico Phillips, a good friend of mine, to talk to them about diversity. And
Yes.
and they're different conversations. They're 10-year-old conversations.
Mm-hmm.
But if I can see a 10-year-old can grasp it, then immediately I bring it into the Rangers,
Yep.
because now I'm dealing with a 16 to 19-year-old elite athlete. And that occurred with Rico specifically, in having him talk to my 10-year-old group, because unfortunately racial comments are made at that age, and as well then brought him in immediately to have the young adult conversation with the 16 to the 18-year-old. But
That's
I think,
huge.
Matt, that's to tie it all together, I think that's the one piece that youth sports miss a bit, is that we think that they're too young.
Yes.
And I don't believe that to be true. You just have to figure out the right language to use to help them to grow and to understand it. And then I listen and observe and see what parents talk about, and try to bring some of that directly to Ranger Nation here.
It's funny you say that because we've had an internal discussion here at Molliteum for about 2 months now, talking specifically on how people undershoot how much a 10-year-old or
Yep.
right down to I think we did 6 years old can grasp. And it's
Yep.
like they're intelligent beings, like all of them are, right?
Yep.
They're attentive beings, even when they don't seem it, they're always listening. That term that they're sponges is 150% true. And you know what goes hand in hand with that is this whole thing behind you are the environment that you're in essentially, right? If we
Yeah.
baby it, if we hide it, if we do like you're going to become that kind of a person. If we teach them how to understand that from a young age, like it's crucial. We even look at it here, self-esteem is built for males. I believe it's between 1 to 13 years old of age, and for females it's 1 to 10 years old. And it's like that's when a self-esteem is established as young adult or children, not even young adults, children, and it carries on throughout the rest of your life. And it's like these are the times to have the conversations in the right way, like you're mentioning. It's not a time to run from it. It's not a time to
No.
hide from it, because eventually down the line, you don't want to be the person that has to have the awkward conversation later on, right? And
Yeah.
it's like
And you
being
could be
able
too
to
late.
exactly and giving that
Yeah.
autonomy to a kid and helping them understand that they can deal with it. It bolsters everything to do with them and how they feel about themselves, right?
Yeah.
And it's
And
it's
that's
crucial.
part of some of the things that we see here on a daily basis that have really helped me
Mm-hmm.
be a better parent, a better
Yes.
father, a better, hockey coach. Is players will come to us and they have some chinks in the armor, some
Mm-hmm.
weaknesses somewhere, and it's not, and I say it's not their fault.
Yep.
Somewhere along the line, and I'm not blaming parents, nor am I
Mm-hmm.
blaming coaches or sport organizations, but somewhere along the line, as leaders in the game, or people who could have had impact within coaches or parents, you don't know what you don't know. And
Yes.
so if a coach didn't know that maybe you can have this safe conversation around teaching in a difficult area that might be a hard topic, well, they didn't know.
Yep.
That's not their fault. But if, as organizations or as leaders within the game, we can start telling people and sharing messaging that there are supports for you to help so that you can enable yourself to learn and to grow and to have those conversations. Well, guess what? Right out of the gate, Matt, we talked about player
Yes.
experience and
Yep.
their growth. And it's not about Coach Joe, but
Mm-hmm.
it's about the 15, 12-year-olds or 10-year-olds that I'm coaching that are getting better. And
Yes.
doesn't need to be complicated.
No, it doesn't, and it's a simple process of just giving yourself to serve and really helping
Yes.
them understand that you're there for them. Like you mentioned on the service leadership side, right? It's like
Yep.
it all comes full circle, and I think that's
Yep.
sometimes what's missing, right? So,
Yep.
speaking of full circle, I wanna pivot a little bit, and then we'll wrap up. But so teach us a bit about this because this is a great initiative I've seen you put together through LinkedIn and different posts that I've seen about it too. But the Women in Hockey Conference, I love, love, love that. You've brought in some superstars who are cutting edge, top of the line at what they do. Teach us a bit
Yeah.
about where that started. Teach us about where that's going and your feelings on the whole topic.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. So 2 years now, we've had to host a virtual women's in conference, women's and hockey conference virtual, as we all know the world we're in. But when I
Hmm.
was hired to the Rangers, I was asked, "How, Joe, will you grow our organization?" And I said it's through diversity and inclusion. It's getting to new fans. And I said I have some friends that I call
Hmm.
friends that are women in the game, and I sit and observe that. Again, you observe and you read data that talk about the growth in women's sport, and it's outpacing boys' sports. And my wife's a hockey fan, and my sisters are hockey fans, and there's this untapped resource that we miss in our game. And I said
Hmm.
to them, I said, one of the things I would do is in and around International Women's Day is celebrate them and find ways to celebrate women in our sport and within our game. Now, in my first year of the pandemic, I didn't know how we were going to do this because we didn't have a season. But the interesting part, Matt, I sit around and I look in my office and I have 6 women on my business staff, and we had one on our hockey staff. And I said, there it is.
Yep.
So I said, we're going to highlight the 7 women on our staff, and we're going to bring in some rock stars from outside of our organization. And the first one will be virtual, and it'll be celebrating women in the game in and around International Women's Day. The second year, which we just did, we focused on sort of business leaders and
Love it.
hockey leaders. So we had the first Kirsten Welsh, the first female OHL official, join us, and we had
Hmm.
um, oh my gosh, and that's awful of me. Kim Davis and Lisa
Hmm.
Furkel, leaders on the business side.
Yes.
Our long-term plan and goal is to do this in person and then
Love it.
allow women to have the platform to do networking within our game. I'd love to find. Here's my pitch out there for people who listen.
Hmm.
I'd love to find a business partner that would work with me to create and whether it's an internship for women in the game directly. And,
Love that.
um, and and that's a goal that we want to do so that we can continuously grow the sport because um, I'm a older guy in the game, and I need new ideas, and we need
Yes.
really smart people and thinkers in the game that can help us as an organization, but most importantly, help us as a sport to grow. And so we've been really, really happy with the response, and we're really proud of the program because other teams have followed suit and hosted
Good.
their own women's hockey programs this year, and right in and around International Women's Day. And you know
Hmm.
what? I think that's fantastic. Erie did one, and I think that's fantastic. So it's just our part to try to give back and to help everybody grow.
I love that. And I love the fact too that you're trying to create the internship side because you know what? We've done that actually here on multiple levels with marketing and different things like that, where it's like you bring an internship in or an intern in, sorry, like you're mentioning, but to understand how they see things, right? And it's
Yes.
like you said, like this listening part is just,
Yeah.
it's so crucial in leadership. And it's not to make like listen to make the sale. I mean, like you listen
No.
because it's like, how do I truly advance this forward, right? And it's the start of all great products is when you actually try to solve a problem and learn more about it, right? And
Yeah.
if you can really dive in and tap into that, which I love that you guys are doing, and now you're starting the ripple effect with it too. It's like everybody wins at this point, and that's
Exactly.
kind of the big win.
And our goal will be to do something in person next year. That'll be, excuse me, in at the odd, physically tied around a game to celebrate the great women. And now my job each year is to figure out internally with our team, how do we
Yes.
maintain accountability? How do we grow it? How is it not just lip service
Yes.
and checking a box? And that's actually, that is part of the fun part, because the
Absolutely.
coordinating of a conference is easy to do. It's the fun stuff
Yes.
afterwards that you can really have impact.
Well, man, and I love the fact that you talked on the accountability part, because you know what? That is a tough conversation sometimes to have. Like, I get there's a
Yeah.
lot of good initiatives, and sometimes that's where they die instead of transformational initiatives, right? Is what we
Yes.
call them. And it's like when you have a truly transformational, sorry, initiative, we speak about it here a lot. There's an accountability aspect after the fact, right? And it's like
Yes.
that's the area that not a lot of people are willing to play at because it's tough.
Correct.
It is, like you said, it's fun, but it's a challenge, and it's a fun challenge when you immerse yourself in it, right? So I love that
Yeah.
you guys have that down. This is great. So
Thank
last
you.
part to kind of wrap this up, Joe. Piece of advice for, the ambitious young male or female that wants to come in and literally follow a path like you have. What would you say a secret sauce, if you will, is to becoming somebody like yourself who is a superstar at what he does?
Thank you. I've done a lot of talks, and I've really tried to narrow it down to a couple things, because I say
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a complicated guy, or I try not to be. One, particularly through the pandemic, and as we get into, and I think it becomes real, is control what you can, control the controllables. And as that relates to your own career and you as a person, to me, it underneath those controllables are two things. One, your work ethic.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let anybody outwork you. So work smart. Don't be afraid of weird hours. Don't be afraid of extra hours. Don't be afraid of weekends, because that's all part, whether you work in
Yes.
hockey, basketball, baseball, sport. The other part that is something that you can control, that I live by daily, I have a picture of it up on my wall here, is control your attitude.
Love it.
And so I can decide, I think, if I'm going to be positive and outgoing
Yep.
and look at the glass half full, which I know has been really hard in the last 18 months, but I can control those things.
Mm-hmm.
And I always add this to that piece when I talk about attitude and how I approach it, is if you need
Mm-hmm.
help with mental health, that's a different piece, and make sure that you get help. But
Yep.
but ultimately, if you're healthy, if you are a healthy mind, have a positive attitude. Be somebody that you want to be drawn to,
Mm-hmm.
and work with, not work against. And
Love
then
that.
the last piece that I always believe in is find a way to get better every single day through learning. Whether it's reading a book, listening to a podcast, furthering professional education. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of people, executive MBAs or MBAs or sport management courses. There's unbelievable certificate programs.
Yes.
Call a mentor, grab a cup of coffee, but
Yes.
find a way. I say every day, but maybe it's not every day. But maybe it's once a year. You do something that helps you to grow, to fill gaps in your work experience.
I
And
love that.
I've taken several certificate programs, to fill gaps in my experiences, because that happens, and that's normal. So those
Yes.
would be kind of the two things, Matt, that I say to young people: control what you can control, and two, find ways to grow every day.
I love that, because you know what? So the control controllables is literally our preacher. We say you missed one with us, Joe. It's preparation, attitude, work ethic. That's what we do here. We say that,
Sorry,
right?
sorry.
But you got to bang on, man, with the learning part, right? It's like, you know what? This is the funny part about learning. So we actually mandate here at Molliteum with everybody that works within. It's like, okay, every 6 months we've got to go to some kind of immersive training, that we do year
Amazing.
round, right? So it's going to be something where we go to a seminar, we're going to cover it, we're going to go. And that's going to happen because it's a forced growing mechanism. And it's like, listen, you don't have to come to the same ones that I do, but you're going to go to something. You're going to go to some kind of
Amazing.
course. You're going to get into something, right? Innovation. The second side is that, okay, now that you have your 6-month period, it's kind of the accountability piece that you spoke about in the transformational initiatives, but it's doing something to feed your mind every single day for 30 minutes, at least. It can be reading articles. It can be a podcast, like you said. It can be YouTube. It could be just something that helps you grow in a sense where you're always staying ahead. And like, this is what people don't get. Like, I think from a lot of the things that we've been doing, it's you get inspired by listening to people who inspire you. And then you get inspired to do the things that you want to grow into. And it's like, oh my God, like, I can't wait to build this thing that's like, you know, person X when they did something on that side, but I want to flip it to this side. And it's just, I think we don't realize as human beings how much we truly inspire each other. Even if you're not a big brand name, but somebody that just has cool ideas, you're going to inspire the masses, right? So
I'm
love
with
it.
you on that.
Totally, man. Well, Joe,
Yeah.
this was an absolute pleasure, dude. We got to get you back on for sure before the season starts or just after, because I think it would be really cool to look at kind of the growth from the off season and how it's going into the in season. So that'll be a good one. But I appreciate you taking the time, Joe. This was great.
Anytime, Matt. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and happy to jump on anytime.